Here is what nobody talks about when they talk about rock vocals. Most voices are not built to last. The physiology alone works against longevity. The tissue, the cartilage, the muscle memory built over decades of abuse on the road, in the studio, in front of crowds measuring in the tens of thousands. Add alcohol, cigarettes, the touring schedule, the screaming, the sheer mechanical punishment of doing this night after night across a 60-year career, and the statistical expectation is a voice that fades before the artist does. But a handful of men beat the statistics. Not marginally, dramatically. We are talking about frontmen still hitting notes in their 70s and 80s that most working vocalists in their 30s cannot reach. Men who survived cancer, heart surgery, addiction, and the full weight of rock and roll excess, and came back to the stage and delivered. These are 10 rock and metal frontmen whose voices, at ages that should have finished them, still stop a room cold. We are going to tell you exactly how old they are, exactly what they have done recently to prove it, and exactly why each voice belongs on this list. Stay with us through number 1, because the most documented case of vocal longevity in the history of popular music is at the top, and the numbers on that entry are genuinely difficult to believe. If you grew up with these voices, in the car, on the stereo, at the show, subscribe and hit the notification bell. This channel covers the full documented history of rock, metal, and hard rock, and we are just getting started. Now, the countdown. Number 10. Bruce Dickinson. Born August 7, 1958, Bruce Dickinson is 67 years old. The Iron Maiden frontman is still hitting operatic high notes that singers half his age cannot reliably reach in a controlled studio environment, let alone live in front of an arena. In March 2024, Dickinson released The Mandrake Project, his first solo album in nearly 2 decades, and toured internationally in support of it. Reviewers consistently described his voice as one of the most spine-tingling sounds in heavy metal, precise, powerful, and still soaring across the full range that made him one of the genre's defining vocal instruments. What makes this entry particularly remarkable is the medical context. In 2015, Dickinson was diagnosed with throat cancer. Doctors warned him that radiation treatment to the base of his tongue could permanently damage his vocal cords. That is not a theoretical warning. Radiation to that specific site is known to produce lasting physical changes to the tissue involved in phonation. The expectation, medically, was that he would return to the stage with a diminished instrument. He did not. By most documented accounts from critics covering his post-recovery performances, Dickinson came back stronger than the medical prognosis had suggested was probable. Bands including Avenged Sevenfold and Trivium have cited him as a direct vocal influence. Iron Maiden continues touring worldwide. The man who recorded Run to the Hills in 1982 is still running, more than 4 decades later. His voice remains one of rock's greatest and most unlikely natural wonders. Number 9. Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes has carried the nickname the Voice of Rock for decades. Deep into his 70s, the case for that title remains substantially intact. Hughes joined Deep Purple in 1973 and appeared on Burn when it was released in February 1974, bringing a funkier, bluesier edge to the band's hard rock foundation, a shift in texture and approach that produced some of Deep Purple's most emotionally resonant material. His ability to shift from tender falsetto to raw rock power made songs like Mistreated and Stormbringer genuinely unforgettable and technically demanding in ways that most rock singers cannot replicate even in their prime. In 2024, Hughes embarked on a tour celebrating the 50th anniversary of Burn. Critics who covered those performances noted that his range and control seemed nearly untouched by the intervening decades. That is a specific and credible observation. Not nostalgia, not lowered expectations for a man his age, but an honest assessment that the instrument still operates close to its original specification. Hughes also fronted Black Country Communion alongside guitarist Joe Bonamassa, where his voice proved it could carry blues rock anthems with the same fire he brought to Deep Purple in the early and mid-1970s. Artists including Miles Kennedy have cited Hughes as a direct blueprint for how to combine raw power with genuine emotional depth in a rock vocal. The Voice of Rock is not just a nickname. It is a career-length achievement that the calendar has repeatedly failed to erase. Number 8. Rob Halford. Rob Halford is 74 years old. The metal god can still summon his trademark piercing falsetto. Born August 25, 1951, Halford fronted Judas Priest for the release of Invincible Shield, the band's 19th studio album, in 2024. While time has naturally reduced some sheen in the most extreme upper register, his voice at 74 remains well beyond dependable and well beyond what any reasonable expectation of a voice that age should be able to produce. Halford pioneered the pseudo-operatic vocal style in heavy metal, the specific technique of alternating between a throaty, chest-driven growl and an ear-splitting falsetto that operates at the upper limit of the human voice. That technique influenced Bruce Dickinson directly, and Jeff Tate of Queensryche built an entire career on the vocabulary Halford established. The lineage runs forward through 4 decades of metal vocals. What distinguishes Halford on this list is his refusal to accommodate the aging process on stage. He does not lower keys. He does not quietly remove the difficult songs from the set list. He attacks the hardest material head-on and reminds audiences at every performance why he earned the Metal God title in the first place. In 1998, he came out publicly as gay, becoming one of the first major frontmen in heavy metal to do so, a moment of genuine courage at a time when that disclosure carried real professional risk. His voice, his legacy, and his presence as one of the genre's defining figures remain completely unshaken. Number 7. Ian Gillan. Ian Gillan is 80 years old. He turned 80 in August 2025, born August 19, 1945, and has told interviewers directly that he has no plans to retire while Deep Purple continues to perform. The scream on Child in Time is one of the most documented and discussed vocal moments in the history of hard rock, a sustained, ascending wail that seemed to operate at the outer edge of what the human instrument is physically capable of producing. His work on albums like Machine Head and In Rock defined hard rock's core sound in the early 1970s, combining blues-rooted phrasing with a raw, primal power that became the template for an entire generation of hard rock vocalists. The cultural range Gillan demonstrated during this period extends beyond hard rock. In 1971, he sang the role of Jesus Christ on the original Jesus Christ Superstar concept album, a performance that placed his voice in a completely different dramatic and musical context and demonstrated versatility that pure rock singers rarely exhibit. That album reached audiences far outside the rock world and established Gillan as something larger than a genre vocalist. Age has naturally lowered and rounded his range, as it does with every voice. But his tone and delivery still carry emotional weight that few active vocalists at any age can match. He influenced Bruce Dickinson, Ronnie James Dio, and David Coverdale directly and demonstrably. At 80, Ian Gillan is still on the road, and the passion in his delivery burns as fiercely as it did when Machine Head was a new record. Number 6. Robert Plant. More than 50 years after Led Zeppelin's commercial peak, Robert Plant's voice is still raising the hair on your arms. The instrument has transformed rather than simply declined, which is a meaningful and important distinction. Plant's voice defined the sound of 1970s rock in a way that no single description fully captures. From the wailing blues of Whole Lotta Love to the mystical folk passages of Going to California, he demonstrated a range of tone, texture, and emotional register that set the standard for every rock vocalist who followed. Axl Rose, Chris Cornell. The lineage runs directly from Plant through the vocalists who shaped the next 3 decades of the genre. Plant spent decades after Led Zeppelin's end exploring musical directions that suited the evolved instrument he was carrying, most notably his Grammy Award-winning collaboration with Alison Krauss on Raising Sand, released in 2007. That record required a completely different vocal approach than anything in the Led Zeppelin catalog. Quieter, more restrained, more intimate. The fact that it worked, and worked at a level that earned the Grammy for Album of the Year, is evidence of genuine artistic intelligence applied to the management of a changing voice. He has continued to tour with his band Saving Grace, blending traditional folk with rock elements that fit where the voice now lives, rather than fighting against it. The stratospheric highs of the early 1970s are no longer the primary tool. What replaced them is genuine gravitas and warmth. Bands like Greta Van Fleet openly emulate the vocal style he pioneered. Robert Plant is not fading, The voice is simply changing form, and the new form is still worth your full attention. We are halfway through the list, and the names are only getting bigger. The top 5 includes a man who underwent heart valve surgery and was back on stage within months, a frontman who has been performing for over 60 years without meaningful interruption, and the most documented case of vocal longevity in the entire history of popular music. Stay with us. Number 1 is worth it. Number 5. Mick Jagger. Born July 26, 1943. Mick Jagger is 82 years old. He is the most improbable vocal survivor in the history of rock music, and the case for that claim is built entirely on documented evidence. Jagger has fronted the Rolling Stones for over 60 years. His voice retains a remarkable amount of the swagger, character, and attitude that made Satisfaction hit number 1 in 1965. His technique was never built on technical perfection. It was built on something considerably harder to replicate: an unmistakable personal identity rooted in blues, soul, and pure rock and roll charisma. Sympathy for the Devil, Gimme Shelter, Start Me Up. Across each of those songs and across each decade of their performance, Jagger's voice embodies rock's rebellious spirit in a way that trained technique alone cannot produce. The physical discipline behind the vocal longevity is documented and specific. Jagger has treated his voice and body with the seriousness of a professional athlete, working with coaches, maintaining strict fitness routines, and approaching the demands of touring as a physical training commitment rather than an occupational hazard. In April 2019, he underwent a successful heart valve replacement procedure. Months later, he posted a video of himself dancing as evidence of his recovery. Then he went back on tour. At 82 years old, Mick Jagger is not simply surviving the career he built. He is still leading it, still performing, still at the front of the stage, with the same presence that has anchored one of the most commercially successful touring operations in the history of live music. Number 4. Roger Daltrey. The most iconic scream in rock history, the sustained howl in Won't Get Fooled Again, belongs to Roger Daltrey. He is 80 years old. Born March 1, 1944, Daltrey turned 80 in March 2024 and is still delivering that scream on stage. His range is not identical to what it was in 1971, and he adapts his vocal approach to account for the changes that 8 decades of life and decades of professional performance produce. But he continues to deliver 2-hour-plus live sets with a level of commitment and emotional engagement that younger performers routinely fail to match. His work on Who's Next, Quadrophenia, and Tommy defined not just hard rock vocals but the entire concept of rock opera as a legitimate artistic format, an influence that runs through musical theater, progressive rock, and the entire tradition of concept albums that followed. Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam has cited Daltrey as a primary influence, and the powerful, emotive singing style Daltrey pioneered can be heard clearly in rock vocalists across every decade since the early 1970s. His ability to preserve the emotional core of songs while adapting the delivery to what the voice can now produce is a genuine masterclass in what vocal longevity actually looks like in practice. Not pretending nothing has changed, but understanding which elements of the performance are essential and protecting them at every cost. At 80, Roger Daltrey proves that the voice of a generation can still speak with authority. The world is still listening closely. Number 3. Alice Cooper. Born February 4, 1948, Alice Cooper turned 77 in early 2025 and continues touring with his full theatrical production. At a live performance today, it is genuinely difficult to measure how much the decades have actually hindered his ability to command a room. Cooper burst onto the scene in the early 1970s with theatrical rock anthems like School's Out in 1972, combining horror movie theatrics with hard rock hooks in a way that had no precedent and that the music industry had no framework for processing. Albums like Billion Dollar Babies and Welcome to My Nightmare cemented his status as rock's premier showman, a performer for whom the visual and theatrical dimensions of the work were as carefully constructed as the music itself. The influence Cooper established is enormous and direct. Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie, the entire shock rock tradition that runs through those artists and extends into metal performance culture owes its existence to the framework Cooper built in the early 1970s. He has released more than 24 studio albums across his career and has never stopped touring. a work rate that, combined with the physical demands of his production-heavy live shows, speaks to a discipline that most performers cannot sustain for a decade, let alone 5. His voice retains its signature sneer and confrontational edge. The stage shows remain as elaborate and as genuinely entertaining as they were when the genre was new. At 77, Alice Cooper remains proof that shock rock never gets old when it is executed with real craft and genuine mastery. Number 2. Sammy Hagar. Born October 13, 1947, Sammy Hagar is 77 years old and still firing on all vocal cylinders. In 2024, Hagar hit the road for the Best of All Worlds tour, a lineup featuring Michael Anthony, Joe Satriani, and Jason Bonham, drawing strong reviews across North America and Japan. The tour revisited the Van Halen catalog that Hagar recorded between 1985 and 1996, material that includes Right Now, Why Can't This Be Love, and Dreams, songs that reached millions of fans worldwide and defined a specific era of arena rock with a commercial and emotional directness that aged well. Hagar's career predates Van Halen by more than a decade. His early work with Montrose, solo classics including I Can't Drive 55, and his entire pre-Van Halen catalog established him as a major rock voice before the Van Halen chapter produced his greatest commercial reach. The numbers across that combined career are substantial. 25 platinum albums, worldwide sales surpassing 50 million, a Grammy Award, and induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. His voice has aged with genuine grace, retaining its warmth, its strength, and the unmistakable enthusiasm of a performer who still loves being on a stage more than anything else. At 77, the Red Rocker's engine continues to run as hot as it ever did. Number 1. Paul McCartney. Born June 18, 1942, Paul McCartney is the most beloved frontman in the history of popular music, and he is still belting it out in his 80s. McCartney has spent more than 60 years at the center of popular music, from the Beatles' first recording sessions in the early 1960s, through a solo and collaborative career that has never meaningfully stopped. Rather than accepting a quiet retirement, he spent recent years touring the United States, Canada, Australia, and South America, and headlined Glastonbury, at an age when most people are not headlining anything. The range of his voice during its peak years is captured by a single comparison. Yesterday and Helter Skelter are both Paul McCartney. The tender, orchestrated intimacy of one and the raw, screaming abandon of the other represent opposite poles of what a rock vocal can be, and he inhabited both with complete conviction. Every pop, rock, and indie artist of the last 60 years owes something specific to what McCartney invented, both as a songwriter and as a vocalist. His voice has aged, as every voice ages. The youthful brightness is not what it was in 1965, but what replaced it is warmth, character, and an instantly recognizable quality that still fills any arena with genuine feeling. Not nostalgia dressed up as performance, but real emotional presence from a man who has been living inside these songs for decades and still means every word. His recent concerts have run close to 3 hours, moving through Beatles classics, Wings hits, and solo material with the energy and physical commitment of a performer who genuinely cannot imagine stopping. At over 80 years old, Paul McCartney is the gold standard for vocal longevity, the clearest and most documented proof that a truly great voice, attached to a truly great artist, does not simply fade. It endures. And if the evidence of the last several years holds, it intends to keep enduring for as long as the man decides to keep showing up. 10 frontmen. 10 voices that refuse to follow the biological script. If you had to pick the single most jaw-dropping vocal performance you have ever seen from anyone on this list, live, in a video, on a record, leave it in the comments right now. The conversation down there is always worth reading. Subscribe if you have not already. Hit the notification bell so the next video finds you. The full, documented history of rock, metal, and hard rock, told straight, with the facts and the credibility the music deserves, is what this channel is built for. We will see you in the next one.